The state constitution requires a balanced budget. How would you plan to comply with this, and how would you go about doing this?
Will not take 101 days to solve it, as the last House did. Well, I've heard people say, or heard talk that maybe we need to do it for every 2 years. That way we're not working on it, finishing it, and then having to get back to work again. Probably start a plan, work it, do it for every 2 years, and commit to it, because that's one of the main duties of the legislature, is to balance the budget, tax, or not to tax, but to spend the tax money appropriately.
What's the 10th Amendment of the Constitution signify to you, of the U.S. Constitution, regarding states' rights?
10th Amendment right here, states' rights. Powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution or prohibited by it to the states or reserved to the states respectively or to the people. The government shouldn't be trying to force down mandates to the states that aren't even in their powers to give. And I think there was a quote by Thomas Jefferson that it says, it comes down to where Thomas Jefferson said, where powers are assumed which had not been delegated, a nullification of the act is a rightful remedy. What he means is that when the federal government passes a law or otherwise forces a state to do something that is beyond the purview of the feds, as outlined in the Constitution, that state ought to have the prerogative through its own legislative process to nullify that federal act. And the states, I believe, not think, that the power belongs in the states, and particularly, fortunately, Pennsylvania goes even further and delegates those powers to local municipalities. And so it's a very local government, as you all know, because you're participating in it.
Do you believe the 10th Amendment of the Constitution has been violated?
Violated in what respect?
Do you think that the federal government has exerted power over members of the state that it doesn't have the right to do?
One thing that comes to mind, and maybe a dumb example, is the 55-mile-an-hour speed limit that was imposed on the states. And when they didn't want to comply, the federal government then said, you won't get your federal dollars. So in that case, yes, and I can possibly see that coming down with the current health care, and that definitely should not be forced down our throats, and the state should stand up toward its rights.
Would you be in favor of a bipartisan resolution for Pennsylvania's sovereignty under the 10th Amendment, as some other states have done?
I don't know enough about it to commit one way or the other on that.
Do you think our tax system here in Pennsylvania is fair and equitable to the taxpaying citizens?
Property taxes?
Taxes in general. I didn't write your question. So talk about whatever taxes you like.
Is it fair and equitable? I think the fair and equitable way of doing any taxation is to tax the income, and that's it. Because if you're not working and have a limited income, at least you know that X portion of that's going to go out. Property taxes, I believe, have gotten out of hand. It really unfairly penalizes those on fixed income. I'm not at that age yet, but it's quickly approaching where my income is going to be fixed, and the property taxes that I'm paying now, and I'm looking and I'm saying, it's going to be a tough way to go. And to me, that is, if that is, and unfortunately locally, that's really the only way the school districts and municipalities have to raise taxes. To me, that's a little bit unfair that there might not be other avenues. So there's some inequities in the system, but probably the best way to do it would be just a standard tax on income.
You believe another alternative would be a state sales or consumption tax to replace school property taxes. Would you support that? Why not?
I just read where Rendell wants to lower the sales tax to 4% and include things like that are currently tax exempt, such as accountants, lawyers, and I'm thinking, wait a minute, you know, an accounting bill can be $1,000 for, you know, tax returns. I'm going to have to pay an extra $60 on that. Well, it would be $40. I'd rather him keep it at the 6% and pay 6%, but not on that. You know, consumption tax. In Phoenixville, explored the possibility of a consumption tax on alcohol because our downtown is very, it uses a lot more public resources than it gives back. And to me, but I found out that the only way you could do that, a drink tax, would be if you had public transit that it was funding. And since we don't have public transit in Phoenixville, that didn't work. But there's a lot of different ways other than, I think, property taxes to address the issue of raising money for needed services. And if we got rid of some of the unneeded services, we probably wouldn't have to raise them as much.
All right, I think that's all we're going to have time for. And we're going to send you, someone's going to send you the rest of the questions for you to fill out on. Thank you.